What you bless blesses you back. What you claim the inherent divinity in will move to resonance with you. And that's often quite physical through this teaching. And also they say what you damn damns you back, which is what you put in darkness calls you to the darkness.
Hello and welcome. I'm excited to be joined today by Paul Selig. Paul is a psychic, a teacher, an award-winning author of many channeled texts, a medium, a channel, and you have a master's degree from Yale. And I didn't know this, but you served on faculty at NYU for 25 years, directing the MFA in creative writing program.
Yeah, that was at a different school at Goddard College. I ran the MFA, but yeah, I was an academic.
I'm very excited to have you on because I found your work through Aubrey Marcus, and I listened to your channel and I thought, okay, I've never heard anything like this before, because I just felt some very deep resonance with your words. And then I read the Book of Mastery and then the Book of Truth. Both had an incredible impact on me. And the Book of Truth is actually the words that you and your guide spoke in that had me quit drinking, had me just come to so many awarenesses. I would say accept so many awarenesses. So thank you for your work.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
What is the origin story of, or have you always been able to channel and all that kind of stuff?
No, I was raised sort of an atheist, and I was not somebody who put a lot of stock in channeling. I think I read half of a Seth book when I was in grad school, which is many, many years ago. And I thought it was really interesting, but I didn't stick with it. I started opening up when I was 25. When I quit drinking, actually, I'd heard a voice telling me to get my act together, and I did. And that was, kind of the first voice of now what is something consistent in my life. So I started opening up, and I studied a form of energy healing that I had been introduced to. And I was volunteering at a center for people who were living with life-challenging illnesses in New York City. And it was the height of the AIDS epidemic then. So there was this need. And I found that when I had my hands on people's bodies, I could hear things for them. So, and I'm not hearing with my ears. It's just like a thought that interrupts all my thoughts that makes no sense to me, that I don't have context for. And as the people that I was working with began to verify the information that I was getting, I began to trust it. And then I started a little group that met in my apartment in New York for about 18 years, really. So I sat in a circle for about 18 years. And I was more interested in the energy that was coming through when I worked. The teachings, as we have them now, didn't start coming through in lecture form until much later. I think I was 48 when I realized they were now lecturing through me in these long passages. And once that began, then the book started. Once I became willing to record and then transcribe the lectures, they said, we have a book to write, and if you take 2 weeks, we'll do it. And that was the first of now 10 books. I think the 10th book is coming out in September. And all of the books are just the unedited transcripts of the sessions. I mean, I don't go back and rewrite them. We punctuate and we, transcribe very carefully against the recordings, and that's what's out in the world. So I look at what I do as stenography. The psychic stuff came with the channeling work, but I didn't really know what I was able to do until I was doing it. And that's the case with all this stuff. I made no sense. All of a sudden I'm doing something that I didn't understand, that I then had to learn to understand. So my work as a psychic is, they call it a medium for the living. I can step into people that I've not met and hear them, and sometimes begin to resemble them. It's a form of clairsentience and clairaudience. So if you ask about your sister, who you're estranged from, and I step into your sister, I can often hear what the challenge is, what the problem is, what she's needing. I can go to you, find out where you're at, what you're needing. It's like I'm brokering conversations on other levels. So when I hear my guides, I'm just tuned into their radio station. When I tune into clients, I'm tuned into theirs. And I think of myself kind of as a radio, and what I do is be in broadcast and listen and interpret when I have to. There's no interpretation in the channeling. That's all direct stenography, spoken stenography, because I don't write anything. When I work with people individually, if you show me a tennis racket, I'll say, I'm seeing a tennis racket. And you're saying, yeah, I play tennis. I go, okay, great. It's like that.
It's really interesting. I'm curious how you begin to make sense of these things moving through you, like these voices. 'Cause I would imagine a lot of people have connection to this type of conversation, maybe not able to write. Like, I think it's nuts when I listen to your books that I'm listening to something that is just continuously being spoken that then gets directly transcribed. It's bananas.
Yeah, and you can actually a lot of from the last books because when the first books were being delivered, I was recording on CD, and the last I don't know 6 or 7 books we moved everything is recorded on video now. So a lot of the initial transmissions are up on YouTube for the later are in the books, and you can see how it comes out. It's not polite. It's not. I'm not sitting there in a lotus position, no, and this is what you need to do. I'm like in it, taking the dictation. It's a very physical phenomenon. I'm hearing phrases, I hear phrase, that when they're all put together, they make sense. But I don't hear the larger sentence or paragraph. I hear it as it's all coming. So, initially I was always hearing for other people. And initially I was hearing fragments. So if I had my hands on your chest and I heard the name Arthur, I learned to say, who's Arthur? And you might say, my father, my lover, my dog, my best friend who died. It was like that. I'm like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I started to trust it, because there would be energy that would move, and I was unblocking people that were stuck,
Mm-hmm.
And were holding old stuff that needed to move. And in the initial group, I was hearing directions for energetic attunements or transfers, really. So we'd be sitting in a circle, and I would hear, everybody receive a hand on your forehead, and the whole room would go bang. It was like Beetlejuice, going, what the heck is this? But it was so physical and tangible, and we all felt it, and that helped me to trust it. And it was all very loving and, very clear. When I had been a very heavy smoker, and when I quit smoking at 48, my guide said, you got to, if you want to, we want to keep working with you, but you're going to have to deal with this. And I did. I quit the next day. And I was a 4-pack a day guy. So it was something. But when that was out of my system is when the lectures began and how I now work. And it's just been a process of my getting out of the way continually and then learning to acclimate to how this works and how to stay clear. That's it.
What do you believe or feel as the guide's messages keep, I guess, evolving? What do you feel about the evolution of it and the message they're really trying to convey?
Well, it's funny because I think they've been very consistent in all of their teachings. And I think the very first book that was dictated through me in, I think, 2009, it was published in 2010. It's called I Am the Word. That, in some ways, I think is the primer for where they're going, although I didn't understand it at the time. They're really talking about the realization of what they call the divine self or the monad or the true self or the Christed self. There's all these different names for it. They all mean the same thing, with that spark of the divine in us that they say seeks realization as in through us. And how this is done is their teaching. And it's an energetic teaching about alignment and energetic coherence. So they say the world that we're living now is the world that we're in coherence with. And it's a world that's very entangled and fraught and polluted by fear. And that we're born into that, so we grow up expecting it. And much of what we see has a basis in fear, and we just accept it as it is. And they're moving us to a level of vibrational accord. They call this place the upper room, which is a level of consciousness, what they call it, where fear isn't operative. And consequently, what you begin to create at that level, how you begin to experience a life is very different because it's not so entrenched, as we have known it in the old way. So it's a teaching of realization and manifestation. It's not about getting what you want and what you think you should have. It's really probably a mystical teaching on, I don't like the, words like embodiment and ascension are bandied about a lot. And I guess that's what they're teaching, but it's, this isn't sort of fuzzy, new agey, feel good stuff necessarily. It's challenging work. And they're moving us to a new basis, really, of operating. And they're saying we're all going through this now. The entire planet's going through this. It's just uncomfortable because we're letting go of what we've known of, and the new has yet to fully be formed and claimed.
Yeah, there's no doubt that it seems like we're in a collective discomfort. Like the words that really made me face and quit drinking was, your body can only alchemize the lowest level of truth you're willing to hold, or it's capable of holding. And then you go on to discuss, is it okay? Do I say you or do I say the guys?
Well, it's they. I mean, I remember a bit of what they say. I don't remember much.
I bet. I mean, they
Yeah.
put quite a few thousand words through you.
Yeah.
But they went on to say that you essentially, like, what truths do you know that you're not living? And for me, that was that I needed alcohol to connect. And there's a reference to, it's like being a fish in an aquarium who learns about the ocean and then goes back to the aquarium. All of these things put together, I just realized, like, my personal passion, like work about myself, has always been, as soon as I'm aware of something, I have to change it. Because knowledge, if not integrated, it doesn't become wisdom really till you integrate it. The words that are often repeated throughout it, I know who I am in truth, I know what I am in truth, and I know how I serve in truth. Even as I say them, there's a resonance to them. And I'm curious, what is it essentially, like, my interpretation of what continues to be invited of me is alignment with highest self, alignment with highest truth, alignment with all these voices that we tend to silence. So yeah, I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Well, it's an attunement. I know who I am in truth. I know what I am in truth. I know how I serve in truth. And initially it came through, I know who I am, what I am, how I serve. And then they added in truth when they were dictating Book of Truth, because they say in truth a lie will not be held. In the vibrational field of truth, you can't kind of resort to, I think, what the personality structure would seek to claim, which is, well, I'm an athlete, or I'm, a mother, or as the basis for being. Those are ways we might experience ourselves, but they're not who we are in truth. The claim, I know who I am in truth. First of all, the guides say knowing is realization. To know something is to realize it. And it's an invocation and attunement. And the guides say all of the attunements are encoded energetically to support a vibrational shift, which is why people feel them when they invoke them. And when you do them with a group, the energy goes through the roof, and you can do it with a partner, and you can claim it for one another. I know who you are in truth. You can feel the energy as it's worked with. So I know who I am. I realize who I am, and that's not who I am, say, as Mark, or the idea of Mark. I know who I am as the true self, or the aspect of that's incarnated as Mark to realize its divinity. So I know who I am, they say, is invoked at that level. I know what I am. So who is identity? I know what I am is expression. And expression, as the guides teach it, is form. So, I know what I am is the manifest self. That I didn't say that well. I know what I am in truth is I know what I am in form, how I'm expressed in form. I know how I serve is how I'm expressed as the true self, who I am, what I am in expression in the world. It's how I'm serving is by being the true self. Now, when this attunement first came through, it was in this little group I had in my apartment. We were trying to understand it. We all kind of got, I know who I am, which we sort of got what that meant, because they'd done this whole teaching of the word, the energy of the creator in action, and they would have us work with that in invocation. I know what I am. We just sort of figured that meant, well, in our lives. And I know how I serve, because we were all living in New York. We all thought, well, that must be what we do for a living, And it wasn't. It really wasn't either of those things. People still think the guides will, take questions. I do live streams. People say, I want to know how I serve, as if they're looking for an action that they can take. And the guides say, well, the true self knows, and the small self, the personality self, thinks. And the true self in expression is how you serve. So when you're expressing at the level of the true self, you're already enacted in service by nature of being. That doesn't mean you necessarily open up a Reiki clinic or, you become a coach. There's a lot of clinics, there's a lot of coaches. Nothing wrong with those things, but how you serve is how you show up and how you be in the world. And then what you do from that level of consciousness will in likelihood be of service. It doesn't matter whether you're a bank teller or a mechanic or you're the crossing guard, for the school. I mean, they're all ways of being expressed. So it's a claim of embodiment. I know who, identity, what, form, and service expression. And they say, and this was interesting too, because they began to teach, I know what I am in truth as its own decree, because they say we've grown up or been in adherence with a cosmology that says if there is a God, it's something up in a cloud somewhere. And the gods say, well, God is all things, including your fingernails and the hair on your head and, everything you see. God is all things. They say there's one note sung in the entire universe that's in manifestation is everything we see. Everything's in resonance or tone. So what they're doing is they're reclaiming the inherent divinity of form. And they say, if you don't get that the body is divine, and I've struggled with that my whole life, how can you truly know the divinity in the tree or the cloud or the ocean? Do you understand? They're all expressions of form. And they say, once you comprehend, I know what I am, you can begin to work with it. And then that's where you get into alchemy. And that's a trip. When they first brought the attunement through it at the Esalen Institute where I was teaching, they put everybody out on the lawn and broke them up into teams, the ones and the twos, and they were claiming, I know what you are in truth, and then feeling the residual vibration come back to them. The guides call it the echo. And they often teach it in workshops. And anytime and it's a very simple teaching, basically, what you bless blesses you back. What you claim the inherent divinity in will move to resonance with you. And that's often quite physical through this teaching. And also they say what you damns you back, which is what you put in darkness calls you to the darkness. And that's the thick, dense experience we're all having here.
Yeah, that seems like such the trap of the human experience, the othering, the polarization, and when you realize the responsibility of actually doing that, like when you do that, you're saying they say that what you're damning damns you. So you end up in the same space of what you're creating.
Yeah, exactly, because that's the level of consciousness that you're claiming another in. So if you're aligned to that level of consciousness, that's what you get.
Based on the time of year and what's going on in the world, I am all about making sure that my immune system is operating at its best. I want to make sure that it is in tip-top shape so that whatever it might meet, it is able to fight off. And so one of the ways I do that is I use Organifi Immunity. It's 100% organic. It's got 500% of your recommended daily dose of vitamin C, and that vitamin C is sourced from organic cherries. It contains the immune-boosting power of ginger, turmeric, and also zinc. It is gluten-free, dairy-free, soy-free, vegan, all of those things. And as I said, 100% organic. And it also has a vegan source of D3 from lichen moss. And that provides 1,000 international units of vitamin C, which is 188% of our daily recommended dose. Vitamin D is so important to modulate innate and adaptive immunity. So if you're interested in giving your immune system a boost and a little bit of extra in order to fight off what might come towards you this season, check out Organifi.com/createthelove. You get 20% off anything you order from there. They have such incredible products. I love them as a brand. I love them as a culture. I love them as a company. Go check them out now.
I mean, they say who you put in darkness or what you put in darkness calls you to the darkness. It's really simple, In one of the books in Book of Mastery, which you've read, which was, I think, their fourth book, there's an exercise in there, and they say, okay, so you're walking up a hill in this mountain, and there's this cave, and you walk into the cave, and the one person you never want to see again as long as you live is in this cave. And you get to walk them out of the cave because you put them there. And because you put them there, they called you there with them. And it's a teaching of forgiveness, but primarily release. It's not about saying, okay, it was okay that you took all my money and ruined my life. Not okay. It's okay that they're who they are. They
Mm.
have the right to be. You can't extinguish the divinity in another, but you can deny it. And they say when you deny the divinity, which is the inherent spark in another human being, you've denied it in yourself. And that's the base. That's why forgiveness is important as they teach it. It's not about condoning poor behavior, but it is about liberating yourself from the condemnation, because that condemnation anchors you in the lower field.
That seems to be a common trap. Like I just look around and I think for myself too, it's so easy to, in political dialogue or just the conversations of the world today.
Yep, it's easy. I know too. But they also say that, self righteousness is always the small self, it's always the personality. And that gets me sometimes. They go, hey, there, I'm doing it again. I mean, I'm not perfect. I have my biases, and there are things that outrage me and all of that. But I also understand that I'm the one who pays, really, for that. And also, you don't change a world by damning what you see. It's never solved anything. What you end up doing, unfortunately, is reinforcing the very thing you don't want, because nothing's transformed that way. I mean, they said this, and I think it was in the Book of Truth, is when they began this teaching. They said, and this was published a few years ago now, that humanity is at a time of reckoning, and they talk about basically everything that was buried is going to get seen. So they say if you got a body buried in the basement, it's going to stink up the whole house. There's an excavation in the backyard. What might come up is from 3 months ago or 3,000 years ago. And these things don't come up so we get to point fingers at them and blame them or shame them or make them wrong, which just sort of keeps them there. The reason these things get seen is so that they can be seen and they're brought to light. When something is brought to light, it can be healed. You understand? So it's like when you turn the rock over and all the little squiggly, verminy stuff is there, they want to scamper from the light. They've known themselves in darkness. That's what they've known. There are aspects of me and of you and of all of us that have been sort of reared in that need liberation. That's how healing occurs. And I think it's also happening at a global level. It's not like we just began realizing that racism is inherently wrong and harmful and deeply destructive, but we're faced with it now, and we're being faced with a lot of stuff again that has been present that we've not, I think, collectively been willing to look at transformation of. And I think that this is probably profoundly important and necessary and rarely comfortable, because who wants to look at their stuff, or their history or their culture's history, or how we've treated people, and, all that's up.
Well, any space that requires that healing, but what you said before, like when you reject something or damn it, then you can't change it. And I think so much of our own past and so much of our own experiences, our families or our cultures or whatever it might be, we do damn it or reject it or deny it. And then inevitably, how do you even receive the gifts of the lessons of those places or spaces?
I don't know. I mean, the people always say, well, you can't excuse something, and I don't know that it's about that. I think that the guides say, this is how they put it. They talk about the upper room, which they say is a level of consciousness. And they say, you can't lift the evil man to the upper room because you have made him evil. So you're already aligning to him as evil as the basis. And if that's where you're operating from, you're in coherence with that. It's a teaching of energetic accord. The guides used to say, and still do, ACCORD or ACHORD is on a piano, and they're making a point. This is about resonance and vibrational tone. So from the upper room, if you're holding the higher vibration, anyone and anything can be lifted, reseen, made new, reclaimed. This is their language, which is actually an energetic act. It's not a moral judgment. It's not appeasing something. It's really the reseeing. I mean, the idea that if there is a God, it favors some over the others is, according to my guys, is completely ludicrous. It's not possible. We're the ones that play those games of favoritism and class and haves and have-nots, and what we should aspire to is always not to be like those people who are suffering, and we create systems that perpetuate suffering. And then we act, it's like all this stuff. This is all our work to do on this plane, I suspect. We're the ones that have to look at what we've created. And the guides say everything that was created in fear needs to be reseen, reknown in a higher way. And part of what we're going to be experiencing, they've been saying this for, 12 years now, is that the systems that we've come to expect to always be there would also have to be reseen and reknown. And some of them may not fare very well. Whether it be religious structures, economic structures, political structures, all of those things, because everything has to finally be reknown in a higher way. And that's a messy process. And I think mostly the stuff that's been hidden in the dark comes flying out. And then we look at that and then we get confused. But, like when you clean a house, you ever really deep cleaned your house? It looks a lot worse before it gets better. You start banging on the rugs and all the dust fills the room. The dust has always been there. Now you're just having to look at it. And I think we're getting to look at it. So that's how I see it.
Beautiful. I'm curious, where do you, when you talk about the guides and the guides being, being able to see what's happening here, how do they sort of position, or where are they from, or all that kind of stuff?
They're only called the guides because my ex, years ago, when my ex found out I could do this, used to say, ask the guides this, ask the guides that. That's why they're called the guides. The name that they've given, when they've given a name, I say, if you wish to call us something, the name they've given is Melchizedek, which is a priesthood, and it's an old energy. It's an old teaching. It's in, I think, both the Old and New Testaments. I don't like getting caught up in names, truthfully. And there are other times in recent books they've spoken of themselves as the true self. And they use the word true self and Christ at times interchangeably. So that's a level of consciousness and vibration. It's not a guy. They're teachers. They say some of us have been informed, some of us have not. I don't necessarily get that this is an extraterrestrial thing, but, they do talk about us as a species with some frequency, and they're not in form. They say they actually have to lower their vibration to be able to work through me. I can't hold the vastness of what they are. So I've been worked with over years, I think, to allow what I do to happen. But they're sort of operating beyond us, but they know us. And they say, at times they've been us. And there used to be a favorite definition of them. Oh, yeah, this is what they used to say. And I loved it. When people would say, who are you? They would say, we are who you become when you know who you are. Which I always thought was really lovely and encouraging.
Yeah, it's almost like you're tapping into consciousness that doesn't have a label. At that level, it's actually just collective wisdom and consciousness and direction that you're, in a way, alchemizing into text for us.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. I mean, that's their work. Their language, they say, is encoded. The books are energetic transmissions. The language in the books provides an intellectual context for the reader, so you don't think you're going nuts. But, when the first book came out, there was no press, no publicists, no reviews. I mean, I think I made $5,000 for the first book. I was very happy to receive it. I was just shy. I was thrilled. I mean, the guide said after it was written, said this is going to be published, and it's going to be the first publisher that reads it, and don't haggle. And that's exactly what happened. But when the first book came out, people started leaving these reviews on Amazon, and they were saying, I'm reading this book and my body's vibrating. I'm reading this book and I'm seeing auras. My favorite was, I'm reading this book and my husband is changing. I thought that was
really... To everyone listening, I'm sure they'll be quite excited about that.
Well, it was just, what people were responding to was that the book was a transmission, that they were in a dialogue with at a whole level that was sort of beyond the words. And all of the books operate that way, according to them. And they're consistent. So, yeah, I think the names are for us. When people start saying, well, I'm channeling the this one and the that one. And, I think, well, okay, that's a level, and names are useful. I like to know what my neighbor's name is so I can call out to them across the road if I want to. But the names are useful, but I think we're working with something that's kind of greater when it is consciousness, you know.
It's almost like as humans, we have this desire to go back to the, like, I know who I am, but trying to put like Mark on the label as opposed to allowing the vastness of no title like guide, or there is a resonance to. I mean, I said that at the very beginning, because even every time I say, and I remember after reading Mastery and then Truth, and I listened to them pretty much right after the other because I was in a, I was in it, you know, I was like right in the zone. And when I read those words, there is a vibrational sense. And how do people, though, because I'm sure for someone listening, they're like, I don't even know how to make that connection, like words, vibration. How do people, I guess, tap more into resonance or more into this space that you're speaking of?
I mean, what changed my life. One of the things that changed my life early on was when I could feel energy, and when I studied healing, and I'd had a big experience of energy that people said sounded like a Kundalini awakening. I don't know what it was when I was 25, and it was a very physical experience, and I started seeing little lights around people after that, and that was the beginning of the opening. And my whole life was going to fall apart for the next 4 years. So it's a good news that I had some experiences to give me a little bit of faith to get through that. But when I began to be able to feel energy, everything changed because you can't refute that. I can dismiss what I'm hearing, but I can't necessarily dismiss what I was feeling. And when I was doing this first group in my apartment, and I was an NYU teacher during all these years, I wasn't looking to be known for this work. I wasn't strategizing my career. I was just into it. And we all felt the energy, and we could all compare notes. It helped me to trust it. The attunements are palpable for most people. So I remember doing an event in Chicago once in a theater, and it was like they would just bring a different sort of psychic every week to talk. Most of these people didn't really know my work, but the guides, because they always do, attuned the entire audience. I mean, it's 300 people. They attune them, and the question is always how many of you could feel this, and 300 people raise their hands. So it gives you, the attunements give people an opportunity for something experiential. When they're beginning to have the experience of it, they don't have to defer. I don't want anybody to defer to me. I'm not a teacher. I'm not a spiritual teacher. I'm not a guru. I taught playwriting at NYU for 100 years and was an admin at another college. So I don't want that baggage. But if you can have your own experience with this, then you can move into your own knowing. And the guides say when you truly know something, there's never a question attached. Not everybody who reads the books or comes to a workshop feels the energy. And I found, interestingly enough, that those are often the people that are the most sensitive, that have developed the most protection because it was hard. You know, I'm super sensitive. I drank too much. I smoke 4 packs a day. I'm not eating too much anymore, which is amazing because I've done that too most of my life. But I'll do anything to buffer my sensitivity. And and it was useful. I checked out in many ways from what I could do and experience. So many people are surprised when this happens. How does this happen? The guides say it's like the attunements work like coordinates. Like if you go play a jukebox and you play D4 and it's always going to be Led Zeppelin, you know, you play the attunement and you're always going to get the same level of experience. Actually, the experience escalates as you get used to it and it becomes more normal, and then it has to accelerate, and it often does. And that's what's happening as people develop. But how does it work? I'm going to ask them because it's present. They're saying the energy is present in the language and it works beyond time. In one of the books, the guide said, you know, if you're reading this book and you're confused about anything, ask, because they said, as we're dictating the book through Paul, we're also with you as you're reading it. And then people started writing, you know, I asked a question on page 3, it was answered on page 4. And a lot of people go back and they said, you know, this is the third time I've read this book. It's a completely different book every time.
That's
What the heck is
amazing.
happening? Well, that's what people say. I don't read the books. I do the audiobook. That's when I really hear the whole thing. I just did the audiobook for the book that's coming out next. And I was like, wow, this is really interesting. It's really different from the others. I was quite excited by much of what they were saying. But while the dictation is happening, I'm just so overloaded. The last thing I want to do is hear or read it. So I have a really wonderful woman who proofs the transcripts against the recordings and asks me questions. But I often don't really sit and read the book until it's ready to come out because I'm having to do the audiobook, and that's all.
So while you're in the transmission, are you conscious of the transmission? Are you more just trying
Yeah,
to keep up?
I'm trying to keep up. I'm conscious. The less conscious I am, the better, truthfully. I say it, it's like what I do in some ways is like crawl into the back seat of the car and turn the steering over to the guides. And they'll often tell me, like, go read a magazine, go occupy yourself. In the first book, they told me to go sit in the outhouse. It was really a little mildly mortifying. Well, take a magazine and go out to the shed. That's what they said. And let us continue. And I'm fine with that. But when they are saying something like if they're doing a dictation, they were to say, the moon is really made of green cheese, I would perk up because I'm hearing it as I'm saying it. I'm just not listening carefully. I might say, wait a minute, wait a minute. And then I'm like poking my head into the front seat. And then they'll say, Paul is interrupting,
I've
or
heard
Paul
that.
has a question. In the very first book, they didn't do that because we're just learning how to work together, I think, at this level. So there's one line in the very first book when the guide say, in the very beginning, they say, this is not a book that's been written before. And I piped in mentally, I didn't say it aloud, what about A Course in Miracles? And the guide said, well, this is not A Course in Miracles. And they were answering my question, but it wound up in the book. So without the question, people went, why are the guides talking about this? Which is a perfectly reasonable question. And in other books, well, they actually got very good at anticipating my questions before I asked them. So now, and I think that's because one book got completely restructured because I interrupted so much. And there was a chapter that they intended to write on principles that began, very well. And then somebody made too much noise and I panicked. And anyway, there's a whole chapter where they end up talking about my fear and my need to control things, which was not meant to be in the. But they said, yes, leave it in the book. This is going to
Yeah,
stay.
because of course it's perfect, for the person who
Well,
needs it.
whatever is there. But I've kind of learned that now, when they say Paul has a question, they're often, and this is only in book dictations, because the book dictations they come super prepared. It's like I'm literally sitting there as if somebody's just feeding me something that's prepared. It's interesting. It's a little different than just lecturing, which at times feels slightly more extemporaneous, but not always. But they'll say now in the books, Paul has a question, and I'm thinking, well, I was about to form a question. I hadn't quite thought it, and then you can tell because they're saying Paul is interrupting, and they'll explain my interruption, but it's in their language, which I find amusing because my language is different. So, like if they say Paul is interrupting, what if I and my fellows are going on a journey and
Yeah.
and I'm thinking, oh, really? That's what I'm saying. But what they are doing is taking the essence of what I would have objected to or was about to try to form and give it out in a way that will allow them to continue steering the text and not sort of take it out of their intention. And at times they'll take the question and just go right back and it's fine. And we include some questions in the books that are asked by students who were present, for the dictation, because all the books are done publicly now, either in a small group that I've convened online, and that's only because I'm not traveling as I used to be. They all used to be dictated in front of audiences of, at the Esalen Institute or weekend workshops, and they'd say at the end of the lecture, this is in the text, which is how I would know.
I've really appreciated when the questions are included or when your own thoughts are in there, because I find often your question or your thought, and this is probably because time isn't real and I'm asking it too, but I find it's a question that I have or a clarifying thing that I'm seeking. So you do it all in real time I mean, I think to anyone listening who's not experienced it, it really is quite something. I'm curious if you'd be open to sharing if they have anything to share, or if there's an opportunity for people to hear just so they can feel the resonance of it.
Well, once I was doing a book signing, this is early on, some bookstore in Asheville. It's a really nice bookstore. And I just, I don't usually channel at book signings. Now I do, but in those days I really didn't. You just talk. And somebody raised their hand and said, well, the guides come through with a message for us. And they said, we are not the entertainment. That was their message.
I mean,
And that
that's a
was
good
it for the
answer. I
day.
like it.
So let me see. They're saying, yes, we would like to say two things. The ideas of who you are, the ideas of who you are and what are being altered now are what are being altered now. And you're all in participation. And you're all in participation to this. When you know it, whether or not you know it. What you believe is always so. What you believe is always so is soon to be rendered other, is soon to be rendered other. Your idea of who you have been, informed by an old status quo, is about to be altered in strategic way, is about to be altered in strategic way. They're saying in a strategic way. You're beginning to question who you have been. You're beginning to question who you have been as the new road is appearing for you, This is a requirement for humanity at this time. This is a requirement for humanity at this time. You cannot go on as you have been. You cannot go on as you have been and ignore what is before you and ignore what is before you. The opportunity here is change. And all change must be seen as productive. And all change must be seen as productive, even in the moment. Even if it doesn't feel that way at the moment, you encounter it. Humanity has said yes. Humanity has said yes to a new way of being, The process has not only begun, it is underway. Is that the two things? One more thing, please. Don't listen to fear. Don't listen to fear. Fear is a poor teacher. Don't navigate your landscape through fear. You will fall off the cliff you've come to. You will fall off the cliff you have come to, which is the action of fear, The action of fear is to claim more fear. The action of fear is to claim more fear. Do not act upon it. Do not enact upon it, period. In the same period.
Wow. Feels very apropos for me, and I think probably for everyone listening.
I don't know. I mean, if people haven't heard me do this before, I whisper the words as they come and I repeat. Sometimes it's a mile a minute and it's nuts. And I sometimes wish I could sit there elegantly and say, the future before, this is just not
Right.
what's happening. Maybe one day, but it's been a long time. I do it directly sometimes. When I do it directly, I actually don't remember anything, and that's frightening. It's just like,
wow. So when you're just lecturing it without the stopping and repeating?
I just know that I'm speaking. I hear what I'm saying, but I don't. The whisper is the transmission, the repetition. It's always like, if you can imagine like ticker tape, it's like that. One thing, the next thing, the next thing. When it's direct, it all becomes sound to me. There was a recording done in Mexico a few years ago of me channeling, and at the end of the lecture, I was just making vowel sounds. The language just stopped. It just became tone. It was freaky.
Wow.
And there's actually, I didn't know this at the time, there's a Gnostic text in the Gnostic Gospels, where there's a teaching that begins that way and ends with A-O-E. It's like the same thing. I went, okay, well, I guess this is what happens sometimes. So I prefer to have a little bit of awareness of what's coming through. And I retain a third of it now. That's about it, of what comes through me. When it's direct, pretty much this much, I'll understand, unless I hear it back.
Yeah, it's almost like the basis or the breakdown to vowels is like just at the construct of language, like it's just touching the edges of language.
Absolutely, yeah.
I remember hearing that a book is written in the vibration that it's encoded, so you don't even need to understand it.
Yeah, the intent of the author, I hear, is present energetically in every book ever written. So it's not just a channel book. The channel book is working with the energy in a more conscious way. But if you're going to go read Wuthering Heights or something, you're going to move into the energy of the Bronte that wrote it, and that level of consciousness and that imagination. I mean, it's, I think we get fed so much now visually, and we're told to feel so often by, how things are packaged or addressed, that we forget that we can have this whole other experience through ourselves, without the label or the agenda. So books are good for that.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for your time and for sharing. And I'm curious, for everyone listening, where can they go get more from you and the guides?
Well, my website's the best place, which is just paulselig.com, paulselig.com. I do a lot of events. A lot of them are online. I do a monthly channeled intensive, which, it's 2 hours a day. I just finished one. I'm finishing one today, actually, later today. And I do every Wednesday almost, I'm lecturing. So there's an ongoing Wednesday class that people can sign up for if they want, in live events. I'll be at the Omega Institute in New York in a couple of weeks in June, and Costa Rica a couple of times in the coming year, and Maui, which is where I live. I'll be doing a retreat here next spring. And Berkeley, California, and Boone, North Carolina. Those are both coming up in August. So there's opportunities to work with the guides in person and live events. And I hear it's just as palpable when you work online too.
Beautiful. Okay, we'll make sure all those links are in the show notes. And thanks again for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode. If this episode resonated with you, one of the best ways to support the show is to go subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any more. Leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to it, or share the episode with your community on Instagram or whatever social place you like to hang out. This helps get it into more people's ears, and I'm so grateful for your support, always. Thanks again for tuning in. Much love.